Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to another one of Nathan Bell's awesome commentary videos where Nate discusses society, politics, culture, all sorts of different things. Give it a like, give it a subscribe, give it a share if you know someone who would like this talk. Today, Nate wants to talk about Anthony Albanese's military policy.
Yeah, well, Anthony Albanese has pledged to increase military spending by $50 billion over the next 10 years. So we see that when it comes to matters of national security and defence, there's little difference between the two sides of politics, Liberal and Labor. They're basically one team in it together, making sure that our national security is fine. I have such mixed feelings about this. As a young radical, I would have said, that money's better spent on education or on mental health or on community services. And I still think that way. And I still think, wouldn't it be good to spend $50 billion on, I don't know, providing community arts services so that people could access services like reliability without a disability? I'd like to see the whole of Australia have access to services like reliability, where they creative arts centres where they're supported to work on projects and start creative businesses. Couldn't we spend that money on community art services or on community services that help people start businesses, or empowering community services that help people progress themselves forward? Couldn't we spend that money on health? Couldn't we spend that money on improving the education system, which I really feel is letting Australians down? Because I meet people in the street and they don't know as much as me, so I know the education isn't that crash hot in this country. But I do have mixed feelings about this sort of large increase to military spending, because over the years, as I've gotten older, I've realised, when I was young, I would have said capitalism caused all the wars and America started all the wars. I don't feel that way anymore. What I've come to realise is that there's been wars all throughout history because human beings are in a constant state of conflict with each other, because we're individuals and we don't agree on the way forward, and we don't agree on ideology, and we don't agree on life, basically, and this leads to conflict. So there is always conflict between individuals, and there is conflict in the natural world as well. Animals have wars, plants have wars. There is war everywhere throughout nature. So I've come to see that war is inevitable and a part of nature. And I'm determined now that this species will end in war and nuclear war, if not climate change, nuclear war or World War III will break out. And I understand that the geopolitical environment and the strategic environment is dangerous at the moment. There are concerns, it's not appropriate for China to claim ownership of Taiwan. So we have to stand by Taiwan, because China doesn't own Taiwan. Taiwan is a sovereign nation, and nations don't have the right to claim ownership of each other. So we have to protect the sovereignty of nations who are trying to be independent and not dominated. And Russia is doing the same thing, trying to claim ownership over the Ukraine. And we have to stand by our allies in the Ukraine and defend their sovereignty and their right to self-govern through democracy. So we have to stand up to powers like Russia, and there are assertive nations pushing for dominance. And also, America's very bad in starting a lot of conflicts and wars, as they always have. So, it's a hot environment. I've come to see all of this as just the way things are, and I can't see it changing. I can't see world peace anymore. I've lost sight of world peace unless the UN takes over the world. And yeah, my view now is you have to enforce peace, because people aren't peaceful. I don't see people as peaceful. Some people are peaceful. I'm peaceful. Alan's peaceful. Many people are peaceful, but people who are peaceful tend to get walked all over by bullies and psychopaths. So as long as there are bullies and psychopaths in the world, there will be war and conflict. As long as there are people who dominate others, there will be war and conflict. So I've come to see that we need a strong military. We need some level of defence force, because there are threats and there is the risk that we'll be invaded. And it's important to have an adequately equipped defence force as well. The defence force has to have equipment that works and is on par with foreign militaries. Because if foreign militaries have better equipment, they'll squash us. So it's a sad reality. I've come to see that it is necessary for any given nation to have a military. But really, I wish we lived in a world where we could take that $50 billion that Anthony Albanese is pledging to the military over the next 10 years and spend it on education or health or on community initiatives that help people start businesses and be creative and community services. They keep pulling funding to community services and youth group activities and all these things that help people improve their life and live better lives and participate in the community, and funneling all that money into stuff like the military and the police force. So I wish we lived in this perfect world where we didn't have to spend money on the military, and because I'd much rather see $50 billion spent on the education system than I would see it spent on new fighter jets and tanks. Um, yeah, but again, as I said, it shows that whether it's Liberal or Labor, they're both just as committed to spending on defence and the military as each other, which is one of the reasons why I stand for small parties, because I believe in radical change and radically changing our society towards a different direction. And I don't see that either of the two major parties are much different to each other when it comes to the big matters of defence and security, which all the money gets spent on. Um, and they're both pretty poor on education as well. Labor's a bit better on education. They're both pretty committed to health. Labor's better on health, but really the two major parties, they're very similar. There's not a great deal of difference between them. And we see that, the left is supposed to be peace loving and peaceful and anti militarisation, but the Albanese government's clearly pro spending money on defence. And you can see from the rhetoric that they believe in national security. It's always about national security, isn't it? It's always about defence and prepping for war, and it keeps us stuck in this mentality of war and conflict all the time. So we keep propping ourselves up to be in this warlike state of mind and this warlike mentality. And Liberal and Labor are both the same. They both believe in big spending on the military. So if we're ever going to have radical change away from militarisation and away from war thinking and conflict thinking, we need to abandon the two major parties, because Labor's not going to give us any different to Liberal, which is why I stand for small parties like the Greens and why I always vote for the Greens, because I want radical reforms towards peace and harmony in this country and away from militarisation. But as I said, as I've gotten older and seen how people fight with each other and how conflict is natural and part of nature, I've come to see that it is important to have some level of defence force. In my Australian Liberal Anarchy Party, I say that individual communities manage their own defence forces and have robot droid protection forces. And I've thought about ideas like civilian militias so that the community can defend itself. But then you've got to give everyone guns, and we really don't want to bring the guns back in this country because it was good. The only good thing John Howard ever did was get rid of the guns. So we don't want to bring the guns back in the community. So we don't want civilian militia and sovereign communities defending themselves. And I sort of talk about that in my Australian Liberal Anarchy Party, but that was the direction I was thinking at the time. We don't want that because it means everyone's got to have guns, and we don't want people having guns, preferably. So we have to have some level of defence to protect ourselves, is what I've come to realise, because there's psychopaths out there. The problems with the world that cause war are psychopathic personality types. It's not capitalism. It's not the economy. It's not any of these things. Psychopaths cause war. Bully personality types cause war, and they bully people like me and Alan, and good people who don't want war get bullied by psychopaths. And so as long as those people exist, there's going to be a need to defend ourselves against people like that. Vladimir Putin is one of those people. As long as crazies like Vladimir Putin exist, then the need for a defence force will exist. But $50 billion, huge amount of money to be pumping into the military over the next 10 years, and just shows that both sides of politics have this strong commitment to a well-financed military. I think the money could be better spent elsewhere, personally, on education and community programs and health and mental health and things that improve the daily lives of Australian citizens and make life better for Australian citizens. Why not take that $50 billion and use it to go towards the fund for a universal income scheme? I support universal income. If we can stop spending so much money on the military, maybe we can afford universal income in this country so that every Australian can have a guaranteed income so that people don't struggle with their finances. But, as I said, we do need some sort of defence force. So I weigh this question up in my mind a lot, and I think about it a lot. Anyway, there's some thoughts about what Anthony Albanese has promised to pledge the military $50 billion over the next 10 years. So drop a comment in the comment section about what you think about the need for a strong and well-equipped defence force.